Hello and welcome to another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about what Karl-Anthony Towns will bring back to the Wolves when he returns to the court, which could be this week. That's what all the latest reporting is suggesting. What will Cat bring to Minnesota when he comes back? What's been missing without Cat in the lineup? Also, a peek at the Nas, Reid, Rudy Gobert starting lineup and all the other combinations with Rudy and Nas playing together on the floor, plus a preview of Wolves Wizards on Tuesday night. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are back in action. The front end of the final back-to-back of the season is tonight. The Timberwolves take on the Washington Wizards at Target Center. We'll preview that matchup here toward the end of the show. I want to get to a few other things first. Number one, the update on Karl-Anthony Towns, what everybody's saying about his potential return. Apparently, he's on the court, like doing actual basketball activities. He may play as soon as middle of this week. So we'll talk that out a little bit here, but also what will he bring back to the lineup? Like, some of it's obvious, but what are the areas in which, Nas falls short of what Cat does in certain areas, right? Nas Reid's fantastic, but there's a reason why Karl-Anthony Towns is so valuable. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the Nas Rudy lineups to this point in the season, and especially over the course of the time that Karl-Anthony Towns has been out with the knee injury. First off the top, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. A reminder, if you can't watch tonight's game, you can listen on SiriusXM on the SXM app. You can just search for Minnesota Timberwolves. You'll hear Alan Horton on the call on the SXM app and catch every bucket of Wolves Wizards. You can also listen to the postcast after the fact on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. You can watch live Luke Inman, and I believe it'll be Tyler Metcalf from Kato Supas tonight talking Wolves Wizards right afterwards. We'll also have that audio here on the Locked On Wolves feed. If you can't watch it live on YouTube, check it out after the fact as well. All right. Let's talk Wolves and not Wolves Wizards. I just mentioned we'll talk about that later. Let's talk Karl-Anthony Towns. Let's talk the latest Cat update. And, once we get past that, what I think is really important that he'll bring to the table the Wolves haven't had over the past several weeks. So first of all, the latest update on Karl-Anthony Towns, this was first reported actually in multiple places that there was video out there of him practicing on the court with the Wolves on Sunday. And now the video that's out there is him shooting jumpers, mostly spot up jumpers, although there was some additional video that got out that was, who was it that posted it? I think it might've been Chris Hine over at the Star Tribune. Somebody posted video of him kind of jogging and, not like actually cutting, but jogging to midcourt and then coming back, catch and shoot threes. A little bit of movement, little bit of, stopping on a dime, not as much cutting necessarily. A lot of spot up jumper video got out there. And then it was reported, Shams Charania, I think, was the first one of Stadium and The Athletic to report on Monday that he actually scrimmaged on Sunday. Now the Wolves do some of those like, the, what's the right term? I don't know. End of the bench guys / two-way guys / fringe roster guys, assistant coaches do those essentially scrimmages after practice. My guess is that's what Cat was doing because it was Sunday. The Wolves played Sunday night. So whatever the team did scrimmage-wise Sunday, apparently Karl-Anthony Towns participated. And Shams said that his quote from his piece, his video that he posted was that Towns is, quote, very, very close to playing. And they're optimistic he'll be on the court for at least one game this week, if not two. The Wolves play Tuesday, Wednesday. They play Friday, and they play Sunday to wrap up the regular season. So he's obviously not going to play on both sides of the back-to-back. Tuesday feels very soon. So I wouldn't he's also not listed as, he's still listed as out as of right now. My hunch is they don't bring him back to play Denver Wednesday either. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely. I don't think they're going to throw him in there against Jokic, first game back, like, hey, I know it's an important game, but like, that's a lot, right? After you missed a month or whatever, just throw him in there. The Hawks game feels like the right move, and maybe you play him in the matinee a couple days later on Sunday against the Suns. That may or may not matter in terms of seeding. It seems at this point that it might. You'd also I guess the tiebreaker against the Suns doesn't matter because you're not going to finish the regular season tied with them, but it would be good to see how you match up against them. It wouldn't shock me if Cat plays Friday and Friday only. And this is just purely based on the schedule. I don't have any information on it beyond what I think my hunch is. He won't play. He's not going to play the back-to-back. They're not going to play him Tuesday. I don't think they throw him out there on Wednesday. And if there's any chance the Wolves play the Suns in the playoffs, and there is, why throw him out there on Sunday and, give more tape to the Suns of the team with Karl-Anthony Towns against their own personnel? Play him Friday. Don't make him come back 36 hours later and play against the Suns. Give him another week off then after getting his feet wet against Atlanta. And, he can come back the following weekend when the playoffs start in earnest for the Timberwolves. So that's my hunch, is that maybe he just plays Friday against the Hawks. But the other possible, maybe he plays Friday and Sunday and gets 2 games under his belt before the playoffs. But fantastic news that Karl-Anthony Towns, that we're even having this conversation. There was some question as to whether or not he'd even get on the floor in the first round of the playoffs. And now it seems almost likely that and of course you add in the Ant comments on TV after the game on Sunday, the win over the Lakers, when he said, Cat's coming back, Cat's going to be back. He said it in 2 or 3 different ways. Clearly he'd seen him on the court over the weekend, right? We know Karl-Anthony Towns is coming back soon. The question is, how many games will he play this week and who will they be against? In terms of what the Timberwolves are missing with Karl-Anthony Towns out. Now, some of it's obvious. Obviously, they're missing their best 3-point shooter. There's Conley shooting 43+%. And actually, the volume is he actually shooting more per game? I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah. Almost identical, actually. Cat's shooting 5.3 points, 5.3 3-point attempts per game. Conley shooting 5.2 3-point attempts per game. So Conley, Towns, 2 best shooters on the Wolves. Towns has the track record. He's the best shooter on the team, right? You're missing that. You're missing your second scorer. You're missing your second all-star. That's all obvious. You're missing size defensively. But what Karl-Anthony Towns brings to the table that Reid doesn't necessarily, there's a couple of things that are easy to kind of gloss over. So I want to dig into that a little bit next. I want to then briefly look at some Naz and Rudy lineups together, and specifically the starting lineup since the Cat injury, and what that's produced, and which lineup with Rudy and Naz together has actually been better than the starting lineup that Finch has used most over the last couple of weeks. And then we'll close the show here today by looking at Wolves Wizards. So all that is upcoming here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion. That's 1 billion with a B, 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a ton of hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. They're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you have to turn down your volume with all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so Karl-Anthony Towns seems likely. The Wolves are optimistic, according to Shams Charania, that Cat will return this week. What have they been missing most, besides the obvious, besides the three-point shooting, besides the pedigree, the, second scoring option behind Anthony Edwards, the pressure he takes off, and all that stuff is much talked about. Now, if you watch Timberwolves broadcast, if you watch the NBA TV broadcast on Sunday with, who was it? It wasn't Dennis. Dennis Scott was the sideline reporter. Spiro was the play-by-play. I'm blanking on the Steve Smith was the color commentator. So no matter what broadcast you listen to, everybody talks about like teams are loaded up on Ant, right? That's obvious. Okay. Karl-Anthony Towns returning is clearly going to help in that area. But what are a couple of areas that Cat provides something the Wolves don't necessarily get out of Naz Reid? And I want to be really clear. I don't state this as a slight against Naz as much as reminding myself and others of just how good Karl-Anthony Towns is and what he brings to the table that's so important. Remember, there's a reason why Naz makes a lot of money now too, but Cat makes more money. There's a reason why Cat is the all-star, the superstar, the guy that was the number 1 overall pick. There's certain things he's good at, really good at. And Naz is also good at, but maybe not to the level of Karl-Anthony Towns. So let's start with getting to the free throw line. That's a massive thing. Rudy's got the best free throw rate on the Wolves because he gets hacked all the time down low, right? Anthony Edwards is next. Not surprising. Kyle Anderson is actually only slightly behind him. Remember, free throw rate is based on the number of free throw attempts per field goal attempt. Slomo doesn't actually shoot the ball that much, partly due to his shot motion and partly due to where he shoots so many of his shots. Slomo actually gets the line quite a bit. Cat is next. And it's not particularly close between Karl-Anthony Towns and the next rotation guy. In fact, Cat's free throw rate is 0.307, meaning he attempts 0.3, or another way of saying this is 3 free throw attempts for every 10 field goal attempts, just a shade over that. The next best Timberwolves player is a 0.179. We'll call it a 0.18 with Mike Conley. So less than 2 free throw attempts for every 10 field goal attempts in terms of rotation guys. Naz is all the way down at 0.167. So Cat has a free throw rate of nearly, not quite, but nearly twice as much as Naz Reid. Or look at it this way, because it's a bit easier to kind of quantify. Cat averages 4.8 free throw attempts per game. Naz is 1.8 free throw attempts per game. And that doesn't factor in, again, the number of shots they get up, the minutes they play, etc. Believe it or not, Ant's number 1, Rudy's 2, Cat's 3. Naz is actually has the fourth most free throw attempts per game on the Wolves, and it's 3 free throws behind Karl-Anthony Towns. Naz is. So Cat brings that element to the Wolves game that has been missing to the Wolves offense. We've talked about this quite a bit, and I think it was maybe mid last week I spent some time on the free throw issues since the Karl-Anthony Towns injury. Minnesota's 29th in defensive free throw rate, meaning they're fouling a ton and allowing opponents to get to the line a ton since the Cat injury just over a month ago. They're 25th in offensive free throw rate since that point in time. The Timberwolves have been horrible at getting to the line. Now, for the season, they're still actually top 10, barely, in free throw rate. But since the Cat injury, they're 25th, according to Cleaning the Glass, in free throw rate, attempting just 15.8 free throws per game. League average over that period of time is 18. And the Wolves are shooting under 16 per game. A huge part of that is no Karl-Anthony Towns. Naz gets to the line an okay amount, but not to the level of Cat. And by the way, he's also 12 percentage points worse at the free throw line than Cat is. 12.6 points, actually, to be precise. Nearly 13 percentage points worse at the line. So if you want to just talk about made free throws per game, that's basically 3 points per game the Wolves are sacrificing by not having Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. And I'm not talking about his per game average. I'm just talking about made free throws. The difference between Cat and Naz, which isn't super clean, but you get the idea. The second thing is rebounding. And this is the point. I've always liked Naz Reid, but I was a bit critical, maybe more critical than the Wolves fan base as a whole about Naz Reid over the past few years, because Naz was playing a lot of center minutes and he just wasn't rebounding the basketball very well at all. He's improved. In fact, last year was his best rebounding season he's had, and it wasn't particularly close. This year is basically his second best, really more in line with the rest of the years of his career. So last year so far is the outlier, and it's not by a lot. His total rebound rate was nearly 2 points better than what it's been this year. His defensive rebound rate was a little over 2 points better. His offensive rebound rate was about 1.5 better last year than this year. So all that stuff was a little bit better. But Cat just has his total rebound rate is 2.3 points better. His defensive rebound rate, which is the really important one for the Wolves, is nearly 4 points better than Naz Reid. So the Wolves are losing the rebounding, and they're losing getting to the free throw line with the Karl-Anthony Towns injury. Those are like, Naz can approximate a lot of the other stuff, right? The actual 3-point shooting, I mean, Naz is a shade under 42%. Cat's a shade over 42%. The volume, Naz actually gets up just as many threes. Let's see. If we just want to look at 3 points per 3-pointers per game, Cat's 5.3 3-point attempts per game. Naz is 5.1. So the volume and the accuracy is roughly the same. Teams don't quite respect Naz the way they do Cat because the track record's not there as much for Naz as it is for Karl-Anthony Towns. But I mean, the volume and the impact, the 3-point percentage is basically the same for these guys. The ability to score off the dribble. There's some things Naz is more fluid at, but he does not get to the line at the same level of Karl-Anthony Towns. The passing, Naz has been impressive at times, but the passing isn't quite to the level of Karl-Anthony Towns. Assist rate wise, Cat's 14.8%, Naz is 8.3%. Naz just isn't looking to pass as much as he's looking to score. And of course, that also means the turnover rate's lower, although we've seen a couple of high turnover games here of late for Naz. There's just a little bit more, there's more dynamics to Karl-Anthony Towns' performance, right? The passing is there, a little bit more risk-taking, certainly more getting to the free throw line and more rebounding. Naz may be the better pure, for his size, pure basketball player, or at least aesthetically pleasing basketball player to watch with how fluid he is, how he could dribble, how he can pass, how athletic he is, how long he is. Whereas Cat's just a bit unorthodox, right? He's a bit herky-jerky at times. The long strides, I would say modest athleticism for an NBA big, right? But the results speak for themselves in terms of his free throw rate and what he does on the glass. Those are all things that are going to be huge when he comes back from Minnesota, and bumping Naz back to that bench role, which will only, of course, elevate what the Wolves bench production will be. Along with this, I want to talk briefly about some Rudy Naz lineups for Minnesota. The preferred starting lineup over the last couple of weeks for Chris Finch has been Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert, but with Naz at the 4 in place of Karl-Anthony Towns. Of course, right after the injury, we saw Kyle Anderson play there. The Wolves offense scuffled a bit. That's being generous. It was scuffled quite a bit. So this is the starting lineup minus Cat plus Naz. In 375 possessions, which is still a relatively small sample, it's a 60th percentile unit. They're a plus 4.8 offensively, according to Cleaning the Glass. The offensive differential. A plus 4.8 overall differential. It's an 11th percentile offense, however, and a 94th percentile defense. Okay, so let me say that again. The current starting lineup, minus Cat plus Naz, is an 11th percentile offense, 103.7 points per 100 possessions only. And it is a 94th percentile defense, which of course is very good, just 98.9 points per 100 possessions. Tweak that lineup. Sub in Nickeil Alexander-Walker for Mike Conley. Sub in Kyle Anderson for Jaden McDaniels. Believe it or not. And this goes from a plus 4.8 60th percentile unit to a plus 35 98th percentile unit. Simply by adding an Alexander Walker and Kyle Anderson and taking out Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels. This really shocked me to see it laid out like this. Now, it's more than half the possessions, but not by a lot. Well, actually, no, it's slightly less than half the possessions. So it's a bit of a smaller sample, but it's also the second most used lineup with both Nas and Rudy in it after the Conley, Edwards, McDaniels lineup. Then you go to the Alexander Walker, Edwards, Anderson lineup. Again, 98th percentile, plus 35 in 183 possessions, so just under half of the possessions that the current starting lineup has used. It's also a better defense, slightly, but a 97th percentile defense. So, and you could chalk that up to length, right? You take off Conley, and obviously this lineup doesn't have McDaniels, but Kyle Anderson has similar length, and Alexander Walker is obviously bigger than Mike Conley. Your activity level goes up. Your defensive know-how stays the same, but you're essentially swapping out the smaller statured team defender in Mike Conley for the larger statured team defender in Kyle Anderson. And then McDaniels and Alexander Walker are pretty close to a wash. If you're talking about guarding smaller guards, Anthony Edwards can guard the bigger guard, whatever. And offensively, that unit just functions a little better because you can have Alexander Walker, or Kyle Anderson initiate offense. And really Nas Reid for that matter. Whereas you're not really going to have Jaden McDaniels ideally initiating offense anyway. So pretty interesting stuff to keep an eye on. Of course, when Cat comes back, Cat will go back in the starting lineup. But some of these combinations that have been fruitful for the Timberwolves, we may see Nas. I mean, we are going to see Nas and Rudy share the floor at times, but we could see Chris Finch experimenting even in the playoffs with some of these really positive Nas Rudy lineups, especially if Cat is on any sort of a minutes restriction or any concerns with re-injury to start out. But also like this particular lineup, Alexander Walker, Edwards, Anderson, Nas, and Rudy has been so good in a expanding sample of nearly 200 possessions. I'm curious to see how Chris Finch handles that here moving forward. All right, let's close by talking Wolves Wizards. The Timberwolves host Washington on Tuesday night. We'll do all that. We'll preview that matchup here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball that makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch, which for somebody like me who tends to procrastinate, even when it comes to getting tickets to events, I do it. And in the past, it's been horrible, but now it's not a huge deal with Game Time because, again, the prices on the Game Time app, they go down when you get closer to first pitch of a baseball game. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and tickets really to anywhere else. They also have customize your spot on Game Time, which is a lot of fun. There's lots of other features that they have, flash deals, zone deals, etc. Also, last-minute deals, again, save up to 60% buying those last-minute deals for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. I attend all of the above. Sporting events are my favorites, but I love concerts. I also love comedy shows, and I enjoy theater. My wife loves theater. I'll go to theater shows. You can get all these last-minute deals at Game Time. Again, all in pricing, like I mentioned. You could also get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy with their seat views. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, the Wolves are playing host to the Washington Wizards here on Tuesday night. It's the first time the Wolves have seen the Wizards since late January. And that was an 11-point Wolves win in Washington, and it was snapping a 2-game losing streak for Minnesota. To date, the Timberwolves, with only 4 games left in the regular season schedule, have not lost 3 consecutive regular season games this year. And, that's incredible, right? And the Wizards had a shot to be the only team to cause the Wolves to have a 3-game losing streak last time around and failed to do so. Minnesota actually trailed the Wizards by 2 at halftime in that game, but they used a big third quarter. Remember, there was that stretch this year where Minnesota was awesome in third quarters, and this was part of that stretch. They outscored Washington. Again, they were down 2 at halftime, outscored Washington 33-19 in the third quarter, and ended up winning this game by 11. Back then, Washington had Tyus Jones playing minutes. They had Kyle Kuzma playing starters minutes. These things are not the same anymore. The Wizards just beat the Bucks a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. The Wizards have not been playing well overall. They've lost 3 in a row. They've lost 6 out of 7. Prior to that, they did have a 3-game winning streak. The one win they've had in the last couple of weeks was over the Milwaukee Bucks. They beat them by 4. Tyus Jones has not played in nearly a month, 3.5 weeks or so, due to a back injury. In that particular game, there was also no Richaun Holmes. There was also no Kyle Kuzma, regular starters for Washington. Those guys all missed Washington's last game, which was, I think, Sunday against the Raptors. They lost to that Raptors team. The Wolves beat by, 48 last week. This Wizards team lost the Raptors by 8. The Wizards have already lost 64 games. Tyus Jones isn't going to play. Kuzma's been playing kind of on and off. It's like, I don't know, 2 out of every 3 games he sits, something like that. So there's a shot he plays, I guess. But these guys are all like, Washington's not real concerned about whether or not these guys will be playing, will be available in this game. When they beat the Bucks, they got 16 out of Jordan Poole plus 13 assists. They got 27 and 7 out of Corey Kispert, and they got 23 out of Denny Avdija, excuse me. So like there's still some scoring here. When you look at the Wizards roster, Jordan Poole, obviously, Avdija is another one, like Marvin Bagley, when he's healthy, obviously can contribute, but he started that Milwaukee game, got hurt. He hasn't played since then. He's not going to play in this game. So it's we'll call it an exceedingly winnable game for Minnesota. And it's going to be hard to kind of like, to truly parse. Normally what I like to do for these previews is I look at, what's a team's profile, what you need to look out for. This is a really hard one for when it comes to this game, because the Wizards roster looks nothing like it did for most of the season. For the season, this Wizards team is basically the worst rebounding team in the entire NBA. They are dead last in defensive rebound rate, and they're second to last in offensive rebound rate. They're also the league's worst three-point shooting team, 34.5% from 3, dead last in three-point shooting percentage. I already mentioned they've lost 64 games. They're 15 and 64. The only team with the worst record is Detroit. They're 2 games worse than, or a game and a half worse than Detroit. They're 4 games worse than, 4.5 games worse than San Antonio. They also, important to note, they play at the highest pace, the fastest pace of any team in the entire league. And, that leads to a lot of 2-point attempts and a lot of attempts at the rim. They don't get to the line very often. They're third to last. They're 28th in offensive free throw rate. Again, second to last in offensive rebound rate, and dead last in three-point shooting percentage. Overall, they have the 25th ranked offense. This is, again, for the season, and the second worst defense in the league, according to Basketball Reference. So you talk about taking out Tyus Jones, assuming you're not going to have any Richaun Holmes, assuming you're not going to have, who else did I say was going to be out? Richaun Holmes, I'm blanking on who the third guy was. Basically nobody in the rotation other than maybe Avdija and Jordan Poole that are like legitimate rotation caliber NBA players. So the Wolves are favored by 16.5 points by our friends at FanDuel. This is a very winnable game for Minnesota on the front end of a back-to-back. The scary thing is they know they're getting on a plane right after the game to travel to a mile-high altitude to take on the Denver Nuggets, defending champs on national TV Wednesday night when they're in a battle for the number 1 seed in the West. So I would implore the Timberwolves to not look past this game, because this is, Washington could be looking at this saying like, hey, this could be our last legit shot at winning a game before the end of the regular season, right? I mean, they've got the Bulls after this, which is somewhat winnable, but then they close with the Celtics. This is the third to last game of the year for these Wizards, and they may be banking on the Wolves overlooking them. That's an entirely possible scenario. If I'm Minnesota, all I'm focused on doing is not getting sucked into a complete back and forth game, making sure that you're crashing the glass, because you should be totally fine if you do that. And just defending without fouling, just lightly contesting shots from a poor shooting team. Don't get into foul trouble yourself. You should be just fine in this game. There's matchups the Wolves should like all over the board. There's really nobody with the Bagley injury. Like there's nobody you really got to worry about in the paint. Of course, noted Timberwolves killer Daniel Gafford is no longer in a Wizards uniform. He was traded to Dallas, so you don't have to worry about Daniel Gafford. Like, there's no size there that you're worried about at all. Like, no NBA caliber size, assuming Richaun Holmes does not play. So Minnesota should dominate the paint, and if they don't get into foul trouble, they don't get sucked into a fast-paced game, they should be just fine in this one as 16.5-point favorites at home against Washington, looking ahead to Denver on Wednesday night. So we will have a show. Of course, we'll have the postcast, as I mentioned earlier, Tuesday night. It'll be posted here on the audio feed, also Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Wednesday, we'll have the basketball party show early in the day, and then I will have the post-game pod posting Wednesday from Tuesday night's game. Wednesday night, Wolves Nuggets, big week. Of course, a week from now, the play-in tournament will be ongoing, and we'll start to get a better sense of who the Wolves will face in the first round of the playoffs, and of course, whether they'll have the first, second, or third seed in the Western Conference. That's all we have for today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. But remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.